Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition,
We've had an interesting
Part
night.
2. Well, I was trying to decide
Part
between saying
2. Part
True
2
Crime
edition?
Edition and Part 2 Edition.
Mm,
Yes.
yeah. Part 2 of the Gracie and Grant. I was about to say Grace and Granty. The, the Gracie and Grant Solomon cases. So we'll be picking up where we left off, which was back to the day that Grant died. But first, do you have any real time true crime?
Me?
You're the only other
Yes.
person here, Mary.
I do actually. So glad you asked. In the late 80s, there were a string of murders in Virginia, along Colonial Parkway. And they were like a year apart, but they were all like Lover's Lane type murders, and so they were linked together. And um, they were like all a little bit different, but some people like pointed to it maybe being like what changed every time was some kind of escalation or like
Mm.
refinement. Like
Like
the
logical
first,
changes.
right? Like between the first and the second one, he had them um go to like they were found away from their vehicle.
Mm.
This first one they were found in their vehicle. The second one they were found away from their vehicle. Their vehicle was still found on Colonial Parkway though, and then the last one they were never found. So
Okay.
like maybe but they have named a suspect in one of the double homicides.
Interesting.
So a man named Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. was
That's a
named
serial killer name if I've ever heard one.
as a suspect in the murders of 14-year-old Robin Edwards and 20-year-old David Nobling.
Why were those two people on a lover's lane together? Second real time true crime mystery.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I could tell you if you want, if we have time, how they ended up there together. She was on a date with his younger, more age appropriate cousin.
Oh, cool.
Um, no,
Oh.
the date didn't go well,
Oh.
and it's believed they were probably heading to go skinny dipping together.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's also um her like previous boyfriend I think was like 26. Like she
Mm.
had like a reputation for like dating older men and like
Okay.
being promiscuous at 14 years old. Um,
Yawn.
yeah, it's tired. But
It's tired.
he was also named as a suspect in the murder of a woman named Teresa Howell, who is not one of the Colonial Parkway victims.
Interesting.
We have never heard of her. So, I mean, you may have, but not in this case.
Keep bringing us up to
So, he has not been linked yet to other the other three Colonial Parkway murders. Um, and then the other one I had, apparently 215 bodies have been found underground behind like a jail in Mississippi, I think.
Might have to
Um,
look.
I don't know. It was like behind a Mississippi jail in Jackson and behind a Jackson, Mississippi jail. However, I do wonder. I don't know the details, and so like I don't know like it's like a penal farm is where they were found, and there are unmarked graves over there,
Yeah, I feel like back in the
or like
day,
paupers'
if you
graves.
died while on the penal farm, they probably just buried you at the penal
Right.
farm.
So like yes, we should find out who they are and like give their families that information, but like I don't think it was like this like carefully kept secret mystery that they were there, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's not the work of a serial killer, I'm
No.
guessing.
No, it's not. This is not like a Dorothea Puente
Mm-hmm.
like uncovering within the yard situation.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Sorry it took me so long to get it out.
It did. It was like the sloth or the whatever in Zootopia.
Yeah.
You're like a Mississippi jail. You're like so unsure of
Well,
your
because
report.
it's not my case, so I was like either she's gonna say these things or I'll cover them next week. But then when you asked, I was like, oh
Well,
yeah, let
next
me
week,
shoot my shot.
they won't be real time anymore.
I know, that's why I had to shoot my shot when given the chance, when asked.
I ask every week.
Nope.
Yep.
Not
All
if
right.
you have real time true crime.
That's true.
I thought maybe you knew.
I don't know anything. Okay, folks. So, if you have not listened to part 1 of this case, I suggest you do so because I'm not going to do a full recap. Also,
And then listen to all of our other episodes. And tell your friends to listen to them and leave reviews on them.
if you
And
haven't
share
listened
them.
to season 1, you will need to hear all of it before you understand this case. Kidding.
Well, we do actually. In part 1, we did make a lot of references to season 1.
Yeah. So, um, you can let us know on part 1 if you already have some theories, thoughts, whatever, and then you can let us know on part 2 if anything has changed or how you're feeling then. But also, what was I going to say? Oh, also, I mentioned this in part 1, but I will mention it again just in case you've forgotten or you are ignoring my advice to listen to part 1 first. I'm going to give another content warning. This case still includes content related to abuse, child sexual abuse, and grooming. So, that has not changed. Now,
Unfortunately.
yeah. So today we're going to get more into the details of Grant's death, and then we will get to recent updates in the case, kind of where things stand right now. So, when Grant went to pitching practice with his dad that morning on June 20th, Grant had not been alone with Erin in about 2 years. In fact, Angie recalls that when Grant was leaving that morning, he said to her, "Mom, I don't want to die in Gallatin today." It's unclear what ended up motivating him to go to WPI with his dad, but according to that statement, it would seem that he was quite scared to do so. Aaron's story is that he was checking his emails after Grant pulled in and parked next to him, and that when he looked up and next to him, the truck was no longer there. Then he saw it moving backwards, where he would then find Grant underneath it. He did not describe hearing any sort of commotion, not a person screaming, not a car scraping the ground, or a ditch full of rocks, large rocks, might I add. Grant was found underneath the truck with his head face up, with his head facing toward the front of the truck and the WPI building. His feet were out toward the road and the bed of the truck. So essentially, he's in line with the truck. Head where the head is, feet where the
Is he
truck
under
is.
the bed or the cab?
He's under the bed mostly, I think. Yeah, I think mostly. Maybe a little in the middle.
I just can't imagine how in the world you step out of the driver's side of your car and it's suddenly in a split second has rolled over you and dragged you down a ditch. Cars don't do that.
Yeah, and like even if it somehow wasn't in park, it would be moving quite slowly. Because there would be nothing on the gas.
Right.
So he's either behind the truck at the bed of the
Right.
truck, which I still think you would have enough time, or even worse, he's at the side of his truck where he certainly would have time to get out of the way. Also, the story is that he would have fallen backwards, so the truck would have hit him, he would have fallen backwards. Then how is his head facing forward?
Look,
under the truck?
I know he's 6'4", but I have notoriously long legs. And yet, when I step out of my car, I'm still next to it. I don't, like, magically step. My husband is 6'3". When he steps out of the car, he's not behind it.
Yeah. Now, I mean, in Aaron's original story, he was getting his equipment out of the back before it started moving, which is a whole other question. Like, why would it not start moving the moment you left it in park, but it starts moving later? But then also, again, if you're facing forward instead of backwards, but you fell backwards, then that would indicate that you would have taken some tumbles. Some rolling around happened. And there is no evidence on Grant's body of any damage.
Like, he's, like, standing like this. The truck, behind the truck starts rolling backwards. And he somehow goes like this instead of like this. No.
Yeah. Instead of flattening it, he somehow dives underneath it. Just for fun? Like, does not make sense.
No, yeah, we have to be so serious. That's like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Right. Now, we will hopefully be able to include these photos on YouTube of the truck scene.
Let's talk about the truck. This is Grant Solomon's Toyota Tacoma that supposedly ended his life. And I say supposedly because there's no evidence that it actually did. But Aaron Solomon insisted that this is what happened both in his 911 call and in his statements to the police. So apparently both cars were parked on this hill. Aaron was in his own vehicle doing some tasks for work. And then he heard a loud noise, and that is when he noticed that Grant's truck rolled down the hill with him underneath the truck. So first, let's imagine how this would have to go down if he was telling the truth. So for one, for this vehicle to roll backwards, this isn't a steep enough hill for it to do it on its own if the truck were in park, which it was. And since it was in park, one of the only things that could have made it roll backwards on its own was if the transmission was faulty. But Aaron did not get this truck fixed or checked out by anyone, which can lead us to assume that there was nothing wrong with the transmission. But anyways, if the truck rolled down this incline, then the back of the truck would have been hit first, and then it would have had to have somehow enough energy, despite the engine not being on, for it to then like go back up. I guess what I'm saying is, if anything, the nose of the truck would have been up there by that grassy area, and the bed of the truck would have been in the ditch. So it would have been like this. Now, as you guys can see, there is damage to the back bumper of the truck. However, for safety purposes, the stock bumper is designed to crumple and like fold in at any minor accident. But if that's not enough, let's look at the tire tracks. So there are clear tire tracks on the sidewalk from the Toyota Tacoma right here, which the back tires are over here, so I'm assuming they were caused by the front tires, especially considering the angle. You can better see them right here. And if you look at this image of the truck, you can see where the wheels are facing. So this is to show how far the front wheels were turned. As you can see, the back wheels are straight. It kind of, to me, appears like the truck drove in going forward into the ditch. Also important to note, this is about a 4,000 to 4,500 pound vehicle, and if it rolled this way into the ditch, can you guys see the grass? Like, do you see how all the grass is like pointed up? I don't know. I can't say for certain, but I'm assuming if a 4,000 pound vehicle went down that way, like the grass would be flat. Another important detail is that Grant did not have any drag or scrape marks on his body. He died due to cardiac arrest that was caused by blunt force trauma to the back of the head. So if he were truly dragged down all of this asphalt by his truck, wouldn't there be some like scrapes, skin, blood on the asphalt? There was none.
According to Aaron's story, the truck moved backwards toward the road and pinned Grant underneath it. which we just explained why that doesn't make sense. When first responders arrived to the scene, the truck was in a ditch with its nose down in the middle of the ditch and the tail of the truck facing upward and out toward the highway. So essentially, the truck would have run into the ditch backwards. So it's going backwards. It would booty dive down into the ditch. But somehow, through the rocks, it pushed its way back upward, almost back out of the ditch, to where it could have just kept driving onto the road backwards, if that's what it's doing. Except somehow it just stopped. So it made it all the way through the blockade of the ditch, booty dived and came back up, and then with no blockade behind it, just stopped.
Sounds like some kind of a Herbie fully loaded horror film.
Yeah.
Like the car with no driver, not even a key in the ignition, is doing a lot of work.
In part. Now, it seems to me that the tail end of the truck would have been stopped by the rocks in the ditch, yet somehow it pushed all the way through them. It has minimal damage to the back, so not really consistent, but I won't lie and say there's no damage. But then what made it stop where it did? Is it like, I mean, this is like kind of bad to think about, I guess, but we must. Is it like the pure like dragging of a body underneath that it just like couldn't keep going? Like Grant's stuck on the rocks, so then the truck can't keep going, but like you'd think this Toyota Tacoma has got a little more power and can just keep on going.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I definitely don't think it would have like put that thing down, flipped it, and reversed it out of the ditch, back out of the ditch, you know?
I know.
That would be the last thing I would think happened.
Yeah. I've like driven my car into a ditch that didn't have rocks in it. And
As have
I could not get it out to save my life.
Right.
And you're telling me I should have been able to just keep on fucking driving forward through it, and I just would have come back up? No, that's not how this works.
I drove our mom's car into a ditch once, and the only way it got out was because we lived in a very rural area, and a boy that had dropped out of our school and recognized us happened to be driving by with a tow truck.
Nice.
So, yeah, like the idea that, and when we say rocks, like boulders, these like boulders.
They're like mini boulders, but yes.
Yeah.
They're bigger than like
big
pebbles.
Rocks. Yeah, they're big rocks. Like the kind that you put in a ditch. Are the truck is going like beep, boop,
yeah.
Over.
But then it stopped on a sidewalk?
The rocks.
Yeah.
I was like, oh wait, that sidewalk's too much for me.
Yeah.
That's a really big rock.
In addition, like I said, the truck did not have significant damage to the back bumper, nor did the undercarriage have significant damage after pushing itself through a ditch of rocks.
Well, it has something between.
Not the whole undercarriage.
Okay.
I mean, right? Like the rocks could still come up,
but
where there's not a body.
Unless,
but I mean, the body also didn't have.
I was gonna say, unless he stays in the same place the whole time in the truck, unless he stays in one place the whole time and the truck kind of like glides over him, maybe it wouldn't get so much damage. But I think he would still have some.
Yeah, how would he not go along with the truck?
I don't know. I lost my sense of reason in this situation a long time ago.
Now, if you recall from Aaron's 911 call in part 1, so I'll say again, if you haven't listened, you must. In the 911 call, Aaron is supposedly speaking to 3 men who are down in the ditch talking to Grant, while he stays many feet away on the phone with 911. However, Aaron does not mention the 3 men in his written statement. A WPI employee witnessed the aftermath of the event, and in his statement, Mr. Hall claimed that when he came outside of the building, he saw Aaron Solomon alone, pacing in the parking lot on the phone. He heard Aaron yell to Grant that help was on the way. In all reports, including Aaron's, he never went down to the ditch area while Grant was in it, stuck underneath his truck, to see if Grant was okay or attempt to get him out. Now, here's where I found a few inconsistencies in reporting. So first, I had read that WPI confirmed that Aaron and Grant did not have an appointment for pitching practice that day. Now, I'm not sure if an appointment was necessary, but I was assuming that since it was noted that an appointment is at least probably the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But then I read elsewhere that the WPI manager stated that Aaron had asked to rent WPI out for the day and to close it to the public. Both of these could be suspicious in their own ways, but obviously these are very different stories.
He said, look, I have $100,000 with your name on it.
Mm-hmm.
Ask anyone in this town.
Mm-hmm.
I will give you $100,000. I do it all the time.
Yeah. Another inconsistency is that although the employee's written statement says that he saw Aaron Solomon alone, it was also reported somewhere that the WPI employee did see 3 men with Aaron Solomon wearing construction-like uniforms. I'm not sure if this is an inconsistency between the employee's first and then written statement, or if this is a misreporting from somewhere. But that's what I got. In the report written by the responding officer, he says that Aaron Solomon reports seeing his son walk to the back door area of his truck and then noticed that the truck was no longer parked next to him. When Aaron got out of his truck, he heard a loud crash and then saw the truck in the ditch. The officer was unable to locate any other witnesses to the incident, and WPI does not have any cameras outside of their building. Now I'm going to go through a few things that people struggle to make sense of in this case, as it pertains to the way Aaron describes it happening. We've already named a lot. So, first, Aaron says that Grant went to get his baseball gear out of the back of the truck, originally the bed of the truck. Many questioned why, during Tennessee July, someone would keep expensive baseball gear in the bed of their truck. Aaron later tweaked his story to say that Grant was probably actually getting his gear out of the back seat, meaning that he was at the side of the truck accessing the back seat. If Grant were at the side of his truck and it started rolling backwards, do you not think that he would have jumped or even simply stepped out of the way?
I would even go so far as to say he could have stayed exactly where he was and not have had a problem.
Might have gotten his little toesies squished. That's it.
Squished?
But, like, how, in your story, do you not think it's more likely my son's just a dummy who doesn't take care of his equipment. He left it in the bed. Or even my son usually doesn't keep his equipment out in the hot sun, but he did this time. Instead, you went with putting him in a part of the truck that wouldn't even kill him? He would be fine over there.
Unless, because we've seen this truck do a lot of things so far, the truck on its own pulled ahead, backed it up, and lined itself up with where Grant had been standing at the side, and then
he
came
still
back.
Didn't have time.
Yep.
As he watched his baseball gear roll away and then come back.
I mean, to
didn't
be
have
fair, in that situation, you might be a little bit too much in awe to move out. Like, what the fuck is happening?
Of the Herbie fully loaded horror movie.
You're like, wait a second. How is my car going like? But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's more plausible that a teenage boy. Because when you said in a Tennessee July leaving his baseball equipment in the back of the car, I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I know he plays baseball, but I think it's more plausible that a teenage boy did not think about the effect that the heat would have on his baseball equipment than, like...
He was killed by the side of his truck.
Like, because even if, let's say he's digging in the back as it starts rolling. He gets taken with it.
Sure.
The door's open and it pulls him. He still wouldn't, I don't think, end up under it the way that he was.
Yeah.
And also all the doors are closed in the pictures.
Well, when people came to the scene, all of the truck's doors were closed.
You don't say.
It is also alleged that one of Grant's bats from the back of his truck was later discovered to be missing. Suspicious. Bats are weapons.
Yes.
Aaron speculates that perhaps the truck just wasn't actually in park, which of course could just be someone trying to make sense of a situation that doesn't make much sense. But it was determined that the truck was found to be in park with the engine off. In fact, Grant's truck had a safety feature that would prevent it from turning off if not placed into park first. The Toyota Tacoma has a 5-star safety rating and was found to be not defective. Forensics were supposedly run on the truck that showed that the truck was operated up until the last second. Now, later, we'll learn that the truck was almost immediately given to Aaron, so I'm not really sure when these forensics were run, but that's the report. Reportedly, they were run. Additionally, Grant was allegedly dragged across the parking lot pavement about 75 feet total before being trapped under the truck in the ditch. However, his injuries did not seem consistent with this. Grant had a significant head injury with a gash on the back of his head and a skull fracture. He was bleeding from his nose, ears, and mouth with dilated pupils. But he did not have any burn or drag marks or injuries to the remainder of his body. His clothes were not even ripped. As I mentioned before, the truck also did not show the appropriate damage, nor did the grass. The grass leading from the parking lot into the ditch was entirely undisturbed, as well as the items in the car that were unmoved and none had been thrown to the floor. This man don't know how to stage a crime scene.
Well, but also, the fact that nothing was, did he airlift the truck into that ditch?
No, I think the truck went in from the highway. So the grass from the parking
and not
lot,
a single person saw that? What time was it?
He ended up making the 911 call at 8:44. So could have been early. I mean, it is weird because they do talk about this being a pretty main highway. It is Gallatin, Tennessee. So I mean, what does a main highway really look like on a Saturday morning at 7 or 8 a.m.? And how hard would it really be to wait till you don't see cars? It literally doesn't even look like the car is wrecked. So he would have just pulled it down into the ditch, gotten out, run up to the hill, gotten on the phone. It may not be that hard.
Is the idea that he killed Grant and then staged it to look like move the car, or that he ran Grant over? Because I feel like,
or I mean, I don't know that there's like a super solid theory here.
Yeah. Because I just think there's no way that Grant was ever pulled under that car in any capacity.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we'll get into it more, and then I'll tell you my theory when you have the rest of the information. I don't hear a lot when it comes to this case of like theorizing of what actually happened, and I think maybe that's a carefulness for the fact that like this case is trying to be reopened, and so people don't want to speculate too much, but
also you have bigger things to focus on when
it's like very
you're
clearly
trying to just get someone to believe that this kid was murdered.
Right, and like it's just very clearly didn't happen the way it was said to happen, but yeah, I mean it is a little confusing what must have happened. So now, like we were saying, it was a fairly busy road, but perhaps early enough on a weekend morning that there may have been intervals with no people around. Now, people who recall driving by the scene after Grant was underneath the truck did say that it looked like a wreck or just a car that had run off the road. Because it does look like a car that has run off the road. Probably because it is a car that's run off the road. But, whatever. Allegedly. When police arrived on the scene, they were only there for 57 minutes total before the last person left.
The last person? When did the first person leave?
Who freaking knows? But crime scene was closed after 57 minutes. They did not have to unpin Grant from the undercarriage of the truck in order to safely remove him. They made no attempts to look for the 3 men that Aaron alleged were in the ditch looking after his son just before their arrival. Literally just before their arrival. If we recall in the 911 call, he's talking to these men, and then we hear the sirens.
Is he like shouting during the 911 call at nobody?
There is a part, people have like really, in one of my other sources, it's called Corruption. It's a podcast just on this case. And they had someone like listen to the 911 call and like listen to the background. And there is a moment where you can hear someone. I wonder if it's the WPI employee that said he came out while Aaron was on the phone. But yeah, I mean, it's a working theory that there were not 3 men, that he just wasn't down there.
That's crazy.
Investigators did not do any tests on Aaron Solomon's phone to confirm whether or not he was checking emails at the time that he said he was. And Grant passed away a few minutes after arriving at the hospital and was pronounced dead at 9:28 a.m. That is why I say no, he was not just like brought there dead after the fact. So,
but I mean, I don't mean like brought there dead, but like,
well, I just mean like
was even killed like at the WPI place and then just placed under the truck. Or laid in the ditch and then the truck was backed up.
I think it's possible that there's still a missing bat and a head injury that could have either taken place in a way where Grant fell into the ditch and then the truck was just placed over him, or he could have been physically placed there, although his dad is 5'8", small guy. So my like kind of very loose theory is that it's possible that he was struck with an object, knocked unconscious, and then the truck was just placed gingerly on top of him. Because that's how the truck is
Even,
found. The truck is not found
yeah.
attached to him in any way.
I was gonna say, at the
And
risk
that
of
makes more
sounding
sense to me that he would have fallen face forward.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding cruel, like, and I know, like, that when we talk about, like, murders, that there's often, like, some strange version of, like, guilt or, like, compassion, but, like, if you really want people to think he was dragged by that truck, why is it backed up so carefully? Like, hit the pedal, you know?
But
like,
I think
if you really want to prove your
it
point.
wasn't backed up at all. I think.
Oh. But I still, like.
Sure, mess up the truck.
Right. Like, or, like, again, not to. I hate saying this about, like, an 18-year-old boy or anybody, but, like, mess up the body. Like, if you really want someone to believe that he was run over by a truck,
you have to understand that the moment that truck is moved, the story doesn't fit anymore, right? Like, you have to, like, but it doesn't seem that he has any, like, fear of, like, oh shit, when they move that truck, they're gonna realize this story don't make no sense.
Right. Like, he clearly has not been run over by a truck.
Right. Like, I've heard, like, crazy ass stories about, like, what are they called? The medical examiner in North Carolina where Kathleen Peterson's case was, and they had, like, people that they said, like, for sure died in a car accident, and later they found a bullet hole in their head. And it's like, that's how I feel like we are right now.
Right.
Like, there is not a single shred of evidence on that body that what was said to have happened.
Right.
So at the very least, someone hit him from the front. Maybe the truck's tall enough to hit a 6'5" guy in the head. I don't know. Knocks him in the head and he falls down, and that would at least account for the way he fell. It would account for the no dragging, but it's like, that's not even the story. Like,
right.
So yeah, it feels like the story is as far as it could possibly be from what the body says. He's not even, like, trying to get them closer together.
And I would never give advice to murderers on this podcast. But, like, you just don't, like, you didn't think for a second, like,
yeah. But, like, that's
about how you were gonna get away with it?
That's the trend with Aaron Solomon, is, like, he doesn't seem to
have to
about that.
Yeah.
He said to his wife, yeah, I'm sexually abusing our kid. And what are you going to do about it?
Right.
He tried to murder her in front of 2 witnesses, though they were children, still 2 witnesses, but was like, what are you going to do about it? And it's just like, I don't think he thinks he's touchable. You know?
Right. And, I mean, so far.
Yeah. I almost skipped ahead. Before his mother, Angie, had arrived, Aaron had already signed off declining an autopsy to be performed on his son. Without an autopsy, the hospital determined that Grant's cause of death was cardiovascular and respiratory arrest, caused or at least affected by his traumatic head injury. Which kind of doesn't help us. Angie described being extremely surprised when she first saw Grant's body at the hospital post-mortem, because she assumed that his body would have been crushed or at least more significantly injured. Investigators did not, and still have not, done any sort of accident reconstruction at the scene. In fact, later, a man would go by the scene and found glasses and Grant's cell phone that had just gotten left behind. That 57-minute crime scene sweep just really didn't cut it, folks.
Can you imagine how awful it must feel to see your child and like, in a way, feel like
they
disappointed? Yeah, like, this should be worse, and like, and somehow that's worse. Like, to like,
yeah,
like, you know, like, obviously losing a child is, like, horrible, but like, at least if it were an accident, like, you would feel like we couldn't have prevented this, or
Sure.
like I don't know what happened, I wasn't there, like it wasn't anybody's fault. But like, especially in the situation that she has been in her whole relationship with this man, like
Mhm.
the second you see that it's not what you expected it, like her mind is immediately like, and
And
that's
I
horrifying.
and I think similar to what we said about Gracie in part 1 is that Angie knows what this man is capable of. So when
Yeah.
she hears from Gracie, this is what dad's doing to me, she has to, for a second, think that could be true. But she hopes it's not. When her kid left her that morning, he
Mhm.
said, I hope I don't die today. And when she found out that he died, you know that her first thought was, did Aaron do this? Or
Yeah.
maybe her first thought was, Aaron did this. But when she got to the hospital and she saw that body, she knew.
Right.
And she was like, that absolutely is not what happened.
Right.
If she had any doubt on her way to the hospital that Aaron was capable of it, she now knew like he did this.
Yeah. It makes me like sick to my stomach thinking about like how like helpless that is, that like one, like because of Aaron, who Aaron is, but like that like everyone is telling you and believing that this was like a horrible, crazy accident, and like it's not
Mm-hmm.
immediately.
Yeah, and it like seems so obvious, and it is kind of so
Yeah.
obvious, but to her it's also informed by who she knows Aaron to be.
Right.
And so I think it's like, how do I shake these people to realize
Right.
that like this is clearly not what he says it is, even
Right.
if they don't have the experience with him that I have. Now, the finding of Grant's cell phone and glasses means that obviously no tests were run on his phone, on
Mhm.
his glasses, on anything. When the random man found Grant's items, he just happened to know one of Aaron Solomon's best friends and gave them to him to pass along to Aaron. It is actually reported that there were police photos taken of the phone in which it was not damaged, but once the phone was later given back to Angie after passing through Aaron, it was shattered in a kind of spidered fashion as if someone had smashed into its center. We also have a photo of that, so if you're on YouTube. However, if police photos were taken and the phone was still left there, then I am confused.
They said, let's have a picture and drop it.
Bye. We don't really need it. We just pictures, and maybe they mean like pictures of the whole like area were taken, and you can tell from the picture that the phone's not broken. I don't really know, but anyway, Angie writes on the Freedom for Gracie website, quote, Grant's glasses were found up by the sidewalk. Grant could not see without his glasses and always wore them. If his glasses are here, the obvious conclusion is that Grant was last standing here, not at the top of the parking lot, end quote. So, kind of same thing I was saying. The truck seems, by physics, to have come in from the highway, had to pass the sidewalk, and go down into the ditch. If Grant's glasses fell off, they didn't make it all the way from the parking lot, drag across, no shattering, no scraping, and make it all the way and then fall away from him.
Yeah.
So, likely, if he was struck in the head or struck by a car, they fell off at the last place that he was standing upright.
The glasses have the same powers as Herbie. They
They
said,
just
whoop.
fly. Everything is just inanimate objects everywhere in Gallatin.
Aaron's like, this is genius.
Yeah, incredible. After Grant's death, Aaron had continued to drive Grant's truck around, even after alleging that the truck's malfunctioning had caused his son's death.
Gross.
Yeah. Life 360 also showed that Grant's phone was being driven around Hendersonville the day after Grant's death. So again, I'm not sure how soon after the incident the man had found the phone and got it back to him, or if this means Aaron drove around with the phone and then went and put it back. But I don't see why he would do that. So maybe the man found them just later that day and he already had them by the next day, or had the phone. So, unclear. But Life 360 don't lie, so. Angie recalls members of the Grace Chapel Church coming over to her home 2 days after Grant's death, and according to her, were describing injuries on Grant that to her knowledge were not accurate, and seemingly trying to convince her that it was an accidental death. When Angie went, why do they know anything?
Yeah. Weird ass people.
Yeah. When Angie went to my son, okay, hold on. I'm still...
Back it up.
My son is still dead. Like, what difference does it make
Can you imagine, like, thinking that that's comforting in some way?
Well, at least...
Or, like...
At least his truck that you bought him just malfunctioned and killed him, like...
And, like, specifying his injuries?
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine, like, someone in your
family
family
why do you
died?
Know my son's injuries and I don't.
Right. And, like, and they're going through every detail with you, like, right after it happened?
Yeah.
Fuck the fuck off. Like, get the fuck away from me. Like, are you...
Yeah.
How impolite can you... Like, we... Like... You know when, like, somebody posts, like, rest in peace to somebody on, like, Facebook or something, and you're like, oh, like, I wonder what happened. But you wouldn't, some people might, and those people are unhinged, but normal people would not message that person and say, what happened?
Yeah.
Because that's rude.
Imagine if I took to your Facebook wall, and I was like, I read the news, so sorry that your husband's skull was fractured. Eyes, nose, and mouth were bleeding. Right. Like, fuck off! Like, I don't need... Like, I read the same thing! Like, leave me alone!
Jail time. Harassment. Yeah. I immediately catch a charge for talking to me.
Goodbye. Now... When Angie went to the funeral home to see her son, she had them open the entire casket to see Grant. That's her son. Mm-hmm. When she noticed that his ankles had been broken. The embalmer explained that they sometimes did this to fit tall people into caskets. Now, Grant was 6'4", but there were caskets made to fit people up to 6'5".
Wait, they stopped making caskets after 6'5"?
Rumor has it.
I know people that are above 6'5".
You could probably get, like, custom, I guess, but it's probably, like, what's at the funeral home.
That's awful.
But Angie was horrified, and it seems that this would have been entirely unnecessary for the funeral home to have done.
Right.
Like, he fit in the casket.
Yeah. That's horrific.
Yeah. And it's also, like, do you not think, now we'll get into that the funeral home didn't really consult Angie on anything, but do you not think that if you had set, like, I don't know if they're alleging that they don't have the 6'5", the extra long people casket, and that's why this happened, but you don't think that Angie would have approved a casket that her son could fit in without mutilating his body?
Right. Like, well, I'm, like, sad because my husband is 6'3". I don't want his ankles
extra long
broken.
Get that. You watch him. I'm watching you.
He's not. I always tell him he can't. He's not. It's not in the cards for him to die anyway.
Unless you commit a crime, like you murder him and are very powerful and need it covered up, I think you're probably good.
But they said they sometimes do that. Don't.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean,
don't do that ever.
Yeah. No.
Wrong.
Like, cut a hole in the bottom of the casket and let their feet stick out. Like come on now.
Anything else. Prop them up at an angle.
Yeah. Fetal position. Whatever.
Yeah. Bend the knees a little.
Yeah.
Stuff a pillow under them. Anything else.
Yeah. The funeral home director, Pam Stevens, also threw away Grant's clothes and belongings, including his clothes from the incident, without letting anyone know. Or maybe she did let Aaron know. But she certainly did not ask Angie if she wanted to keep her son's clothes before she destroyed them. One of many people that we will find out are connected to Grace Chapel is Pam Stevens. So, that's 2 on the board. Now, the Dina Johnson who banned Angie from filing any more motions for 4 years was a Grace Chapel member, and Pam Stevens, funeral director, is a Grace Chapel member. So, just keep it up here. Around this time, Aaron also told Gracie and Angie that they can be a family again.
You're confused, sir? Nobody fucking asked.
Yeah, we weren't holding out for that.
Ah, thank God.
Cool.
We want to be family with you now more than ever.
Sounds like a death sentence. Now, I'm going to play for you Aaron Solomon's speech at his son's funeral, and then we'll get your thoughts.
But I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, it's painful.
For those that may not know, I'm Grant's dad. Before I begin, I have to say a huge thank you to everyone who's here, who may be watching, who has reached out via social media, calls, text. The outpouring of prayers and support has been overwhelmingly, indescribably amazing. The entire family appreciates it, feels it. It truly makes a difference. It does help. People have said there are no words. I know there aren't any words, but prayers matter. All right, you've heard a lot about the teenage years with Grant. I'm going to give you a few funny things about Grant you may not know. Most of you may not know. Just a few of us know. You might have noticed in 2 of the pictures of the slideshow from his birthday, the night he was born. If you notice, his eyes were just so wide open. From the moment he was born, he had this wide-eyed curiosity about the entire world. It was like he was studying and exploring every family member that held him that first night, starting with his mom. His eyes were so wide, and because he was passed around with close family, within an hour, we had given him the nickname Mr. Peepers. That was his first nickname because of his eyes. And he was Mr. Peepers for a few years until things graduated and other stuff. Now, thanks to sports playing a major role in the lives of both of his parents growing up, Mr. Peepers had a baseball, a football, a basketball, and a basketball goal in his crib when he got home from the hospital. Got to start him early, right, coaches? You know? But his curiosity went way beyond just sports. You may have also noticed a couple of pictures from the slideshow that appeared to be dinosaur themed, right? If you noticed that, that was the great dinosaur birthday party, complete with one of the grandmas in costume, because Grant loved dinosaurs, couldn't get enough. So from like age 2 to 4, me and Angie found every dinosaur book we could find on the planet. And he wanted me to teach him how to pronounce every name properly, like at 2.5. I'm not kidding. So I'm not talking like T-Rex and Velociraptor, man. That's the easy stuff. He's got that. No, I'm talking Brachiosaurus. I'm talking about Archaeopteryx. Yeah, you didn't know that one. I'm talking about Giganotosaurus. Yes, 5-syllable dinosaur names, and all of them. He knew how to say all of them correctly, and he would correct adults often if you spoke them incorrectly, but he would do it in a nice way. Now, around that same age, we found out that he really liked baseball, and he wasn't too bad. He had not turned 3 years old yet. We're in the yard, and he's hitting a plastic ball with a plastic bat off a plastic tee. And he's cranking some out. Mind you, he's not 3 yet. And all of a sudden, he just leans over, knocks the tee down, and says, "I don't need that anymore." And me and Angie look at each other like, what is he talking about? He's not even 3. But I'm like, hey, he's calling me out. Okay, I got you. So I get the ball. I get like 10, 12 feet away. And I just, it's the little soft, gentle, soft toss. First one, cranked up on the roof of the house. I'm not kidding. Me and Angie look at each other with jaws on the ground. We're like, all right. And I'm like, all right, let me get that ball back. That was just beginner's luck, right? Second softball, just 10 feet away. Cranked up onto the roof of the house again. I'm like, all right. I get the ball. I'm like, all right, let's try this out. So I get about 15 or 16 feet away. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to give it a shot. And I give an overhand pitch. You can probably guess what happened. An absolute laser that like almost takes out a window on the side of the house. And it's a plastic ball. And we're just like, what in the world? So from that moment on, he's not even 3. I threw overhand like that to him even last week. One little side note, T-ball parents were tripping out when that started happening because he started playing immediately in T-ball, and I'm throwing overhand to a T-ball player, and that kind of, they were like, whoa, and then they saw. All right, there's a couple funny stories that a lot of you didn't know. Now, as long as I can remember, I've always believed that things happen for a reason. And I think maybe it was born from the fact that my birth father died in Vietnam when I was 7 months old. So for years as a kid, I wondered why, We're all wondering why right now. But then later, I realized that it had to be a godly thing. He was the why. If my dad had not died, my mom would not have remarried the man who loved me, adopted me, and raised me and moved us to Tennessee, which led me to having 2 amazing sisters. It also allowed me to meet Angie, which led Angie to giving birth to the 2 most amazing children, Grant and Gracie. Godly things. The way we were led to discovering Grace Christian Academy. We discovered it during its first year. Tiny school, started right in this building. Then Grant started here in 3rd grade, and Gracie was in preschool in its 2nd year of existence. And you've heard from a couple of his original classmates that have been with him along this journey. So that's a godly thing that we ended up here, that Grant and Gracie ended up here. Fast forward to Monday morning. Around 8:45, something happens right beside me that is such a blink of the eye, bizarre, fluky, tragic, unexplainable accident that takes Grant's spirit from this earth. And the only way I can rationalize it in my mind is it's a godly thing. And while it has me, his mom, his sister, his girlfriend, his family, his scores of friends, teachers, coaches, and teammates, heartbroken, mad, confused, and a lot of us asking why. Ever since Monday morning, I, along with his mom, his sister, his girlfriend, his best friend, his family, his scores of friends, teachers, coaches, and teammates have been experiencing Grantly things. And Pastor Steve, pardon me, I don't mean that in a blasphemous way. At Monday night's prayer vigil, Ed Cash starts talking about Grant, and the most vibrant rainbow I've ever seen appears right there in front of us. You can see both ends, which I've never seen, and it's right in front of the gathering, and it's actually almost a mirror image of the formation of the ark that the crowd had gathered in right there. That's a Grantly thing. At the same time, 763 miles away in Sarasota, Florida, Grant's good friend and former teammate, Carson Ford, who was just up here, is sitting on the beach in Sarasota, mourning about the loss of his friend and thinking about Grant. He didn't know anything about the rainbow back here in Leapers Fork, but guess what appeared to Carson? A rainbow. That's a Grantly thing. And of course, as we've all shared and talked about, there have been multiple rainbows around all over here ever since Monday. And ever since Monday, Angie and I have been bombarded with stories from people a lot like what you've heard, but of other ages as well, adults, people that he didn't play with and go to school with, people who hadn't met him, but telling us how Grant positively impacted their life. There are scores more that didn't even share today that have been shared with us, and that means a lot. One young man came through the visitation line last night and gave me an envelope with 5 written pages. 3 to me explaining what Grant meant to him, and 2 more pages written to Grant telling Grant what he meant, which is a lot of what you've heard. What truly warms our heart to know that our son made people feel that way. I know it warms mine. Lots of stories. Just this morning, Brent Doherty, a friend of mine, sends me a picture of his son, Will, at a 13U baseball tournament in Jackson, Tennessee, with his son wearing the crosses painted on his face. And he's 12. And he said, 4G money. But the Grantly thing that so far blows my mind the most, after the accident scene was cleared Monday, a man was looking around the scene and found Grant's cell phone, his GCA baseball hat, and what's left of the sports goggles he was wearing. Ironically, this man just happens to know one of my best friends, Lee, and gets my number from Lee, texts me to know that he has Grant's things and he wants them returned to his family. This man is 55, 56 years old, admits to Lee that he has never in his life been a believer, ever. Had done a couple things in his life and lived rough, just didn't believe. But he tells Lee, what happened to Grant Monday has affected him so deeply that he's a believer now. That is Grant teaming up with the ultimate coach to win even bigger games than he won down here. That's a Grantly thing. Grant?
All right. I know that was long, but I needed you to hear the beginning, and I needed to get you through to the man being saved.
father raped me, hurt me, and I'm not going to be a victim of this monster. He's a rapist, he's a molester, he's a liar. My voice to be able to tell you that my father raped me, hurt me, and I'm not going to be a victim of this monster. He's a rapist, he's a molester, he's a liar, and he's a killer. I hate my dad. I'm absolutely terrified of him for everything he has done to me, my brother, and my mom. I don't want to call him my dad anymore. He's never listened to me. He has hurt me sexually, physically, and mentally. He has caused so much pain for my family. He has tried to manipulate me and has manipulated others, and it has worked. Ever since I was born, he would always have control over Grant. Dad would just scream at Grant, like I could hear it from everywhere in the house. It was awful. One time Grant and I were watching TV together, and all of a sudden Dad comes up and grabs Grant by his shirt, pulls him up, and just yells at him in his face. It was so bad to watch. Dad would get into Grant's head so much. He would limit food and call him fat, criticize him just to the point where Grant would feel so awful. Dad would limit the time Grant had in the bathroom on his phone.
When she gives a reason, it kind of like, okay.
Yeah. She's like, she's so impressive. Bye.
Okay. Bye.